Good morning. What a beautiful, beautiful song, and done so well. I thank the octet and Mark, of course, and Ting for her accompaniment. I can't believe what you say, because I see what you do. Those aren't my words. Oh, I might have said them once or twice. Maybe you did too. But they're quoted from who? James Baldwin. I can't believe what you say, because I see what you do. Many of you know that Mary and I went on vacation for a couple weeks, a little less, to Mexico, to Oaxaca, and then to a beach town. In Oaxaca, we took a couple of half-day tours, minding our energy levels. We did not go out all day in the hot sun. We saw some interesting things. One of the tours took us to a ruin, and the guide, who was just a lovely guy, was, as he said, he was an anthropologist. He studied anthropology, and he'd been doing tours for maybe 30 years or so. And we stood at different spots near the ruin. It was a big, big field of different, actually, ruins. And we moved around. And at one point, and I really can't tell you the whole context because it kind of blurred out. He started talking about Native peoples, and then he talked about African Americans, black people. And here we were, tourists, maybe 15 of us in this little group. All of us, except for two, were either American or Canadian and white, and the two that were not were from Spain, didn't speak English. So he would translate. He would say things in Spanish and English, and my Spanish is not great, so I didn't do all of that, but the English did pretty well following that. Más o menos. At one point he said, you know, blacks are wonderful people. They're particularly good at sports and boxing, especially. Now, if you had to guess what was going on inside me at that moment, I have in a number of situations throughout my life spoken up. You know, as a gay person, I used to travel around the state doing trainings around AIDS issues for healthcare providers and so on. And I got into the habit, some of you know this story, of getting on planes, small or large, and pulling out a picture of my family constellation at the moment. But we'd start talking. I'd say, hey, how are you? I'm so-and-so, you're so-and-so, great. We start talking, and where do you live, I would say. And they'd say whatever the neighborhood was, or city or town. And I'd say, great, how's housing there? And they'd tell me how wonderful it was most of the time. And how about the schools? Great, really good schools. We're very proud of them. And then I'd say, really, because, you know, we're looking for a house. And I'd pull out the picture of my then partner, Mindy, and our little boy, Seth, and myself. And I'd say, our family's looking for a house. I wonder what it would be like for us to move to your town or city or whatever it was. Occasionally, people were positively responsive. More often than not, people either physically edged away from me, seriously, or flat out said, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think you would be welcome there. So, you know, and I'm not trying to equate racism and heterosexism at all. I'm talking about here just my tendency towards speaking out. And so I did that for probably a year of working in the AIDS arena for over 15 years. I traveled for a number of years, but for about a year, maybe a little more, I would do this. I felt it was my duty. I really felt it was my duty to challenge people in that way. And then I got tired. I got tired of it. I thought, you know what? Some other people, some straight people ought to be doing this, not just me. It gets to be tired for people to pull themselves physically away. I'm going to start crying, folks, sorry. It is not a pleasant thing to do, but I did it out of a sense of duty as long as I felt I could. So moving from that issue over to the issue of racism, lots of times I have experienced myself as speaking up, but you know what happened this time? I didn't. When that tour guide said what he did, my impulse was to say, yeah, and lawyers, doctors, teachers, business owners, and presidents, and Congress, you know, the whole 9 yards, and I didn't say a word. There's a part of me in that moment that felt like I really should do this, say something. It was just, why not just say something? Maybe there were other people in that circle who felt the same way, but they too just were quiet about it, laughed it off. It was sort of funny. But it's not funny. It's not funny. And so I feel like I failed. I failed to do what I should have done. For wanting to avoid feeling uncomfortable or singled out as the one who always says something. They wouldn't have known that about me, but I guess they might have guessed. And so I apologize to the people of color here, to the African Americans and mixed heritage people here. I failed myself and I failed you by not speaking up. You know, James Baldwin wrote some pretty powerful stuff about race in America. In the mid-1950s and into the 1960s especially, he wrote quite a bit. In the end of it all, he would come to the conclusion that while blacks in America had every right to be angry, to be outraged, to want revenge, that wasn't the path to take. That white people and black people needed one another for America to reach its fulfillment and for all to reach their own personal fulfillment. He sat with Nation of Islam leaders, learned about their approach. He sat with a diverse group of people from different points of view and perspectives about race relations. But that was his conclusion, that we need one another. He wrote and spoke so eloquently, yes, that word, eloquently. And that was a long time ago. And if you just read some of his writing now and don't know that it was written a long time ago, you'd say, oh, yeah, how current this is. And then you'd look and see, oh, it's been said over and over and over and over. So I can't believe what you say because I see what you do and what you don't do, Baldwin might say. So when Mary and I were in Oaxaca, people warned us that it's the state in Mexico where there are the most earthquake faults And when we got to a beach town where we luxuriated for 4 days, should we go to the pool or maybe the beach? 4 days of that. There was an earthquake while we were there. We were in our hotel room, and it was sudden and it was sharp. It was 4.6 or something like that, and centered not too very far from where we were. In that moment, our world shook. And then when we left to begin our journey home, we just missed another bigger earthquake that was centered 2 hours south of where we had been. Why isn't the whole world shaking? Not from earthquake, but from the quake that happens again and again and again along the fault lines of our race conflicts, of our lack of understanding. Part of what our lack of understanding as white people goes is rooted in our lack of history. You know, I rail against places like Texas, where it's reported that the Board of Education in Texas has eliminated some basic stuff from the textbooks in Texas, minimizing slavery, pulling out references to Helen Keller and Hillary Clinton. There's a list. I get all jazzed about that. But then I think back to the education I had, which was supposedly a fairly decent education in the public school system in New York City in that time. We weren't really told the whole truth of anything, were we? We weren't. I know I wasn't. A lot of it was a sentence or two that kind of made things sound like, and there was a problem, but we took care of it. Or there was this person who did good things, and what a hero, without looking at the whole trail of what wasn't maybe so good. And now we have those reports about people in Virginia in office, blackface during medical school, and I don't know all the other references of where the other people were involved in doing that. And the arguments back and forth about they should resign. No, they shouldn't. They're doing good things. Yeah, they blew it then, but, and it's back and forth and back and forth. I'm not going to weigh in on my judgment on that. Just to know that it's painful. I have no doubt very painful for the people in Virginia and for everybody from there out, spread out like the aftershocks of an earth shake. Instant news, those folks who did those particular things and people who do things that are today looked at as wrong weren't anticipating instant news. Ways that people find out about those stupid things, ignorant things, things out of ignorance that we do. It takes seconds. Push a button, and everybody knows everything that can be unearthed about you. It's not like they were thinking. Who's going to know? But I imagine that people who did blackface and do blackface still don't quite imagine or understand or consider that it might be hurtful or a problem. So it's 2019, and it's 400 years ago that the first African slaves were brought to Jamestown, Virginia. As I understand it, the Portuguese owned these 19 slaves, and they were then stolen by pirates, and the pirates brought and sold the slaves in a Jamestown market. Of over 12 million African slaves delivered to the Americas, I mean North, Central, and South, to the Americas, around 350,000 were shipped and sold in the United States. By the time of the Emancipation Proclamation, which was to take effect January of 1863, there were more than 4 million African slaves in the United States, people from African descent, black people. Not all were freed by the Emancipation Proclamation either. It only applied to southern states, the states of the Confederacy at the time: South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Shortly after the war started, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina then joined the Confederacy. But you know, Missouri and Kentucky, while declared by the Confederacy to be part of the Confederacy, weren't ever fully part of the Confederacy. They were border states and never officially joined the Confederacy. And of course, Maryland and Delaware, they were border states and they were Union states. Well, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't apply to them. Did you know that? Some of you, yes, and a lot of you, no. It didn't apply to them. So we make a big deal, and I like to think that Lincoln was a hero. I like to think that. But it wasn't from a moral perspective. Slavery must be eliminated. You know, he came up with this a few months before January of 1863, and what he said was, you know, if you southern states don't cease and desist from fighting, come back to where you belong, this will take effect January 1st. It was a military decision, not a moral decision. He wasn't so clear, although apparently against slavery in a general sense of it, he wasn't so clear that we were all equal. He and a number of other people who were so-called against slavery, what they really wanted, at least in part of their unfolding and understanding, was to help the freed slaves move to Liberia in Africa. My life flows on in endless song. I have to, you know, personally, I have to sing. There was a time when I couldn't sing, and I won't get into all of that, but there was a time I couldn't. But I really rely on my own singing, whether it's in the shower or in a group. My friends, did I tell you about my friends who I sing with? I sing with 3 other women. We call ourselves the Song Sluts because we'll sing anything. And we do. We've done it on and off for 25 years now. I have to sing through sorrow and through joy. Just a little aside. Get to know your minister. Do you know what Juneteenth is? Some of you know what Juneteenth is. Well, So here we are, some states, you're free. Over here, nah, not really. Well, Texas was being flooded with people from the South who took their slaves with them rather than not have their slaves. So Texas became a huge center of slavery. But the slaves there didn't even know about the Emancipation Proclamation. And freedom there didn't take effect until 1865. And in fact, that's true in the border states that were given allowance not to free their slaves. Eventually, either federally or statewide, they were freed through other means, not the Emancipation Proclamation. But it took a year or even two for that to occur. I don't know why it is that the world doesn't shake more, that you and I don't get more shaken than we do. We say a lot and we do less. And I want to honor that at the same time, people do a lot. It's not like people aren't doing anything, but somehow or another, we're reading things by Baldwin that sound like they were written today. We're very concerned about a president who has narcissistic personality disorder. It's nothing little. It's a major thing. And psychologists from all over the place have said, yep, that's what we got here. Okay, that's fine. So that's where that's at. But I think as a society, we suffer from a little too much narcissism. And what I mean by that is it's all about me, not we, for a lot of us and for groups of us, or we go along with groups of us. It's about me instead of we. And historically, too much has been about our exceptionalism, how great we are. Yes, no. Some wonderful things happen in this country, and have, and some really horrible things have not been addressed. So, I'm going to stop here. I know you're looking at your watches. You're saying, is she going to stop soon? Yeah, I guess so. May we be shaken up enough to do the good we say we dream of.